Hey, what's going on? Welcome back. I wanted to talk today about listening to God's call and embracing the journey. I know I've talked previously about like David and Goliath, right? Where it was so much about David's journey that led him to actually being able to beat Goliath. But recently we had started watching Moana at the house. And so we're doing Moana and I thought, gosh, goodness, what an example of God's calling that Moana goes through, right? So Moana is a little girl, keeps trying to go to the ocean, right? She keeps wanting to go. She hears this calling essentially. So I'm going to refer to the ocean as God's calling, right? And the whole time, her mom and dad are like, no, you can't go. Like they're just like a little toddler, right? She's like, toddle, 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 walking into the ocean. They're like, no, you can't go into the ocean. They're physically removing her from the situation. Like, no, you can't go, you can't go. Then when she gets kind of age of like, maybe she's gonna go out there and explore, her dad's like, hey, I really gotta show you something, right? And he leads her over to the mountain where they stack the chief's stones. And he's like, one day you'll become a chief and you'll stack your stone on here, making the whole mountain taller, kind of bringing it up. And she's like, and he mentions to her, he's like, you can't, I know you keep saying you need to go out there, right? And I guess something we know that dad doesn't know is like the ocean chose her at the very beginning when she was little. He doesn't really know that, the grandma does. Anyway, so he's like, hey, I know you keep trying to go out there, but your answer and your people aren't out there beyond the horizon, they're down here, they're on the island, right? And so I thought, wow, there's so much into it. So let's unpack it all. Here's some notes I took, so I'll be kind of checking in the notes. So listening to God's call, embracing the journey and finding the gratitude, because I think that is something that can help the most, changing our perspective on things, especially in our daily lives, right? And things that could seem mundane, especially in like motherhood or something. And so I think this will all wrap around, but it's a train ride, so hop on in this train. And so if Moana's answering this call, right? Oh, so here's the thing. So the dad's like, you need to be a chief and you need to help these people. And so they want her to stay in the village and be the chief, right? To help the people do the stuff. But then to actually become the best chief, because he's saying you can't go out there, you need to stay here. To become the best chief, to essentially fill their dreams, right? And God's calling, she does need to go out there, right? Because they start running, the coconuts are black inside, the fish is gone, they essentially have no food at the island. And she's brave enough to say, hey, I'm gonna hop into this canoe, I'm gonna go out there, I'm gonna solve this issue, and then I'm gonna come back. And she ends up coming back as the best chief, because if she did stay, they would run out of food. They wouldn't have anything. She wouldn't be able to lead a village, right? And I think that's so interesting that sometimes we have to kind of check things out and explore to figure out what the calling is, where do we need to go, and even fulfill those expectations, whether it be out of our parents, like in Moana's case, right? And I think that's in all of us somewhere, right? We want to make mom, dad proud, whoever it is, just whatever. And so fulfilling those expectations that maybe we set upon ourselves, maybe they were pressed upon us, right? Depending on the culture. I know in different cultures, it's, the parents really tell you what you gotta do. My parents kind of didn't love any of my career path choices. They were like, and they like grew up in poverty, like nothing at all, right? My mom grew up through communism. And so like, of course, what she desires most for me probably is safety and security, which means having a really secure, safe job, therefore making money to provide for my family. And so when I did like the modeling or the acting in LA, like she was just like looking down upon on it. Nothing really was good enough until I think I got married. And she's like, wow, you finally have a husband, And so in different cultures, your kind of parents, maybe they want you to be a doctor, an engineer, something safe, secure, and it's going to bring a lot of money, because money brings security. And our parents grew up, a lot of them, with not a lot of money. And so all back into exploring what God's plan is for us to maybe fulfill those expectations or our own self-expectations, because I think that's going to be the biggest thing is how do we feel with ourselves, right? Because often we're like, oh, well, when this happens, I'll finally be happy. When this happens, I'll finally be happy. But this whole time is still going, and we're spending time being unhappy in our own selves, kind of, right? And so it's finding the gratitude, finding this journey, and being good enough for ourselves, because we are good enough. And so let's get into it. So how do we recognize God's calling, which I think is such a fascinating question. My daughter asks this all the time because she loves the Samuel story where Samuel hears God's voice. And so she's like, Mommy, when will I hear God's voice? What will it sound like? How do I know? And what an interesting question, right? Because I think sometimes when we look back, we're like, oh, well, maybe this was God's calling, maybe this was God's way of protecting me. But it's not usually until we're looking back, right? And so I love the question of how do we recognize when it's God's calling right now, and how do we make decisions that are best for ourselves and God's will? So how do we recognize God's calling, and why do we resist stepping into it? Right? Because sometimes you might feel it inside, like you want to go and do this, right? It's like, I feel this calling, I feel this passion, and maybe God is really calling me onto this, right? But what's easier is creating excuses, and I did this for such a long time with this podcast, right? Because I was like, well, once I get the light, once I get the cute chair in the background with the plant, once I rearrange the room so much, right? And then I'm like, well, once I have a better microphone, so this microphone isn't here, and then I'll start doing it, and none of it really mattered, right? Because it's the conversation that really matters. But I was like, well, when this happens, and so I'm analyzing it now because I don't want to take it because I know it's happening in bigger scope in my life, where I'm like, well, when this happens, when I'm making this much money, then I'll be able to buy this, then I'll be able to go shopping and spend money on myself. I want to go get my nails done, but I'm like too guilty to go spend money on myself instead of my family. And so I'm like, it's okay, it's just nails, but I feel bad, you know what I mean? So I'm trying to step over just even that. So I'm like, oh, well, when I make more money, I can go get my nails done, I can just wait. And so I'm living in this wait till when, because when it happens, there's a new thing, right? It's always a new thing that comes up. And so if we're not present in the now, we're missing anything that's going on. I have big anxiety of missing time because I'll never get it back, especially with my kids. And so I'm already trying to really be present and enjoy. So why do we resist stepping into God's calling when we do hear it, or we think maybe we're hearing it, right? If we're getting that picture painted. And then how do we learn to enjoy the journey rather than fixating on the destination? We hear that all the time, right? It's not the destination, it's the journey. But it's so hard to see it when the journey's hard and you're waiting, I guess, for the reward for it to be well, this was really worth it. But I think looking at the journey, right, of hey, I'm getting stronger, smarter through everyday situations, right? I'm stretching my thinking, I'm elevating into new, so Moana answering the call, I think this is so cool. So if God is so the ocean's calling her, right? So I see that as being the God's call, and she's trying to answer the calling. So the ocean called Moana just like God calls us to our purpose. And then even when she doubted, the ocean was always there to guide her, just like God is always present with us, right? And I think in the movie, we kind of witness it of oh, it's so silly that this ocean randomly will help her. Sometimes it won't help her, right? And I think it's because sometimes if we think, oh, God's not helping us, I think it's God's way of saying, no, you need to go through this process so you learn the thing that you need to learn here. Even when the ocean shipwrecks Moana, right? And she's like, ocean, I asked you for your help and you shipwrecked me into this island. Now my boat is shipwrecked. I'm on this island. I don't know where I am. And then she looks around. She realizes through this series of events, she actually ended up where she needed to go because she found Maui. And she's looking for Maui at this time to save the Tafiti, try to save Tafiti, get the heart. And so I think that's so fascinating because there's so many times when I'm if you ask God for help and it feels like he's not answering, then it's wait, what am I supposed to learn in this right now for me to move on to the next thing, right? Because if you think of video games, there's certain challenges and areas you need to visit for you to learn a specific skill. Maybe you get the bow and arrow, so you learn archery, therefore you can beat the dragon. Or you go over here, you get the skill of flight, therefore you can, and right? But without going to that first stone that is struggling, challenging and hard, you can't, you don't have enough skill to get to the next level, essentially, right? There's so many things we have to learn on each step, and there's a reason we go there. It's just hard to see it all the time. And so her parents wanted her to be the chief, right? And of course, she wants to be the chief. She loves this village. She wants to do that as well, but she hears this call. And so I think it's fascinating where she steps out through fear, right? And into faith of this is gonna work out. And Ocean does pick her up when they need to, and God picks us up. There's so many situations that God protected us, right? And so, so she has to leave, and then she does become the best chief, right? She saves an entire village and brings back voyaging, which is what they used to do, take the boats, explore the islands. And so they're hey, whoa, we're back out here exploring more islands, right? Maybe they're finding more than coconuts. And I love that coconut song in there because they talk about, hey, you don't need to go anywhere. All you need is a coconut. Think of this coconut. We use the water from it. We use the leaves to cook the meat in. We use the nets from the fibers. They make the nets from the fibers, right? So it's like, hey, you have everything you need here. You don't need to go. And I think, she gives them such a bigger gift of like, hey, let's go voyaging as well. Because what if there's not only coconuts? What if we get bananas and mangoes and whatever other fruit? Oh, and so I think this is really cool. So there's this song, right? This is like an analysis essay on just Moana, but we're really into it. So my daughter and I love to talk about this. So a lot of this is actually from our conversations, kind of. And so when she's on the boat, she has already saved Maui. Maui leaves because his hook's been broken, And it's a sad part. Moana's like breaking down on a boat, and we see the manta ray, the grandma, come back to kind of give her encouragement, right? And she relieves some anxiety. She's like, hey, I should have never put that much anxiety on you to go and save the whole island, because Moana says, hey, I don't think I can do this. And Grandma's like, hey, I really shouldn't have put that much anxiety on you. And I think that's fair to take as an apology, right, from the older generations, from any pressure that has been applied to us to say, you have to do this, right? Because here, Grandma meant it in the act of love. She's like, I know the ocean chose you, you're meant to do this, and all the things that go along with the movie. So in this boat, Grandma sings these words, and I think it's so cool, because she's like, sometimes the world seems against you, the journey may leave a scar, but scars can heal and reveal just where you are. The people you love will change you. The things you have learned will guide you. And nothing on earth can silence the quiet voice still inside you. And when that voice starts to whisper, Moana, you've come so far. She goes, Moana, listen, do you know who you are? So she says, through all of these life changes, through all the many things that we learn, we still need to listen to that voice inside. And so then Moana answers. And I think this is such a cool way of kind of explaining it, because Grandma had just said, Moana, listen, do you know who you are? And Moana starts to answer. She's like, I am the girl who loves this island. And so she goes, I've delivered us to where we are, which I think is a great quote, because often we hear that in the Bible, right? The Lord will deliver me, right? Like save me, protect me. She kind of means it like, hey, I got us where we are. Which she did. She's like, hey, let's talk about the things that I have done instead of thinking, oh, maybe I don't deserve this, maybe I can't do this. Let's talk about the things, hey, that got me here. She said, delivered us to where we are. I have journeyed farther. So she's, went to the horizon. Nobody wanted to go past the reef. They said, nobody goes past the reef, right? When she's a little girl chasing. The dad's like, nobody goes past the reef, Moana. So she has journeyed farther than anyone else has, which must have been so, isolating, right? She's on an ocean all by herself. And this is all, again, because I think of like, not only just like your personal journey, like if you were Moana, or through motherhood, however you want to see it, right? But there's been times where maybe if you've stepped further than others have, it seems very isolating and scary. It's like, what is going on around here? What is all this? And I think of motherhood very much like that, because especially those who haven't grown up with good or any like motherhood example close to our age, right? So we don't have an example to look at. We don't see even what's going on. Like our parents only knew the village, right? And the neighbors. So they only knew this is how everybody acted. And so now we're in this great world of social media, for better or for worse, right? But to see other examples of things that are working, we're all discussing, kind of we're like, hey, and we're learning from one another. But there's an ease almost, right? When you see someone else doing it, and you're like, oh, I've seen them do it and it worked in whatever kind of situation it is, right? Or the relatable videos where you're like, oh, you go through that too. You feel a little bit of like weight lift your shoulders. And so I think, but when we became moms, right? I don't think we had that example in real world, and some of you have, and I think that's so wonderful, right? For me, I didn't have that example where I can like, well, how's your day going? What are you guys doing? I had no idea. I was so clueless. My pregnancy, first one was through COVID, so I couldn't attend like the in the hospital class, but I should have done more reading. I don't know. I felt so lost when I stepped into it. I was like, Moana on my boat. I'm like, I'm in the middle of the ocean. I'm supposed to follow these stars. Like, what do you mean I'm supposed to go get to Fiji, right? It's like, how am I supposed to raise this baby? Am I doing the right thing? It feels so alone. It feels so isolating, right? And the waves, you want to talk about an ocean, right? It's like waves of emotions, whether it's from you, your child, the personal life, the time spent for things, like the waves are just back and forth, the winds, it just feels really like you've been weathered, like you've been on a boat if you've gone through certain like ups and downs in motherhood. And so Moana's like, hey, I'm stepping farther, good for you, Moana. I am everything I've learned and more, right? Just like I have done all the right things and more. And it's like, but still it calls me. And I love this next line. She says, and the call isn't out there at all, it's inside me. She's like, I've been listening to this call out there, but wait, that call isn't out there. And the call isn't out there at all, it's inside me. It's like the tide always falling and rising. So certain situation, we hear the call loud or we hear it quieter maybe. I'll carry you in my heart, you remind me that come what may, I know the way. I am Moana. We were doing chalk yesterday, and I started just singing that song like on the top of my lungs. And I was like, I am Moana. And some neighbors walked by, they're like, whoa, that didn't Moana was back. And you know, they're just kind of clapping and me yelling. And so more points are done. Gosh, I thought this was gonna be like a quick little, but there's just so much in it, right? I was like, oh, it's like a silly movie, but I'm like, man, I feel you, Moana. So along with Moana, let me see. Oh, the answering of the call. So we may think we know the best, but true leadership comes from following God's plan, right? So it's like, even when she shipwrecks, she still ends up on Maui's island to find Maui. When she questions herself on the boat, when Moana questions herself on the boat, right? She's like, ocean, why did you choose me? I can't do this, right? And I thought, okay, why do we so often disqualify ourselves out of something, right? There's so many excuses where it's like, oh, I want to do this, but I can't do this because I can't, you know, for me, it's like, I want to do the podcast, but it's like, well, I want to do it, but I can't do it because I have to be with the kids. Or I want to do this, and then I'd create a reason that I believe, right? It's an excuse, but we believe. It's like, well, of course I wanted to start making just outfit videos or whatever, but then I felt like this is so silly. But I feel like because I didn't have the Amazon store to send the links, I wasn't ready, so I couldn't do it. But that doesn't even make sense. Right? Like, why am I thinking backwards? I'm just so used to seeing the outfits and everybody asks for links. And so sometimes when I get people ask for it, I'm like, oh, of course I want to get it for you. But then I'm like, whatever. I just get a little anxiety over it. It doesn't matter, but it's more of I thought I had to do the thing before the thing. And I'm like, no, I just want to do the girlhood. I love seeing what people are doing, and I want to, share it as well. But why do we disqualify ourselves? And this can be in such a bigger thing of in our church, they were talking about how maybe somebody wants to step into the pastor role, right? And it's oh, I want to become a pastor. And well, maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm not this. Maybe I'm not that, right? And disqualify ourselves where it's hey, maybe we should listen to God's calling and step into the path of God to kind of follow hey, I'd rather choose these other things instead of choosing the excuses. And I thought, I was whoa, such a cool way of phrasing that. So if God has put a calling in your life, I was thinking of who am I to not answer it then? Because sometimes I'm oh, I can't do this and I can't do this, and you create excuses. Then it's I start thinking of this way also about when I get the voices in my head, and it's oh, well, this is dumb, you shouldn't do this, or about anything, right? You start kind of hearing all of this, what will people think, whatever. And then I start thinking of the idea of, right, if God's put a calling on you, if it's for God, right, it doesn't matter, right? Other people's opinions shouldn't matter. If we're hey, this is the thing I feel will bring me most happiness, in that sense, if it makes you happy, it doesn't matter. We shouldn't listen to the other voices. How often do we let excuses win? And whether it's in religious form, right, if this is the calling of God, but we're not answering, are we listening to then the voice of Satan, right? The enemy at that point, right? If we're not answering one, are we answering the other with the excuses? Are the excuses the voice in our head that we hear that are the negative talk? Instead of saying I can't, we would say I'd rather follow God than my excuses, which where I'm trying to turn it, where I'm okay, I'll have an idea, but then I'll listen to the voice, and I'm no, it's not a good idea, and then I'm wait, no. And you put the excuses aside, and if God has put this gift in me, how can I be the vessel of helping it happen? And so, back to Moana. she's like, I don't know if I can do this, goes out there and really becomes the chief and saves the whole village, and continue becomes the chief, because now there's Moana 2 coming out. So we're very excited about that as well. I got thirsty. I got my water. So, and then something I talked about in the beginning was like the journey, because we always hear, okay, it's not the destination, and it's the journey, but the idea of how the journey is all that we have, right? So like the past, whatever happened, we can't actually go back to those moments. So we literally physically can't even like go back to the past. And then of course we can't jump forward to the future either, right? So we can't be in it, enjoying it. Either or causes either like anxiety. I think stress maybe and depression with the past seems like anxiety about the future, right? Thinking about what might happen, but we don't know what's gonna happen. So all we have is right now. And then this whole idea about like not waiting for the perfect moment because things are still happening. So it's like, do the thing you wanna do, right? It's like, Negi, just do it. Just like, do the thing you wanna do. Make time for it because you matter. Right now matters. Today's another day. Tomorrow's gonna be another day. If you don't start for a month from now, I'd be like, oh, I wish I would start a month ago. And kind of, I think somewhere in there is like taking accountability for ourselves, right? Wherever situation we're in, is the situation we're in, whether we got ourselves there, where somebody else, whatever, like to say, okay, this is where we're at. What am I gonna do from here, right? Instead of creating blame or excuses, I guess just starting to think forward. And so Moana and motherhood, so doing things that are scary, where she like sailed into the storm at a shipwreck, right? No, she didn't even have voyagers in her time growing up, so she didn't have an example of how to like sail the ship and voyage the ship. And so it's like the motherhood where it's like we didn't have example of what is that even supposed to look like, or if we did, maybe it wasn't what you'd want an example of it to look like. So now we're learning to find like role models, right? Like motherhood role models, I guess. And then so I was thinking more about the sailing and the ship, right? And how it's the ship captain kind of mentality, right? Where the captain doesn't just avoid a storm. Like a captain knows how to navigate a storm. So it's like you have to be a captain, kind of know, hey, I know bad things are going to happen and I know storms are going to happen. How am I going to navigate through them? Because you can't avoid them. Storms are going to happen. So how do you navigate through them, right? So how do we respond to them? Gosh, I have so much. Well, I'll go kind of quick. And so in that sense, I was thinking about like being, adding like gratefulness and being grateful, and something sometimes that helps me to switch to gratefulness kind of quickly is I think of like what would be the opposite. So it's like sometimes when I'm like doing a third load of laundry and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want to be doing this third load of laundry. What would be the opposite, right? It's like, if I didn't have these laundry machines, I'd be doing 3 loads by the riverbank, and I don't want to be doing that. That sounds like a lot worse. I'm like thankful. Wow, I'm so grateful for my washing machine and drying machine, right? Or it's like, what would be the opposite of 3 loads of laundry? No clothes. Like I'm so thankful we have been able to get clothes and reclothes and we can look clean, and right? So it's whenever I'm like frustrated with things, I'm like, what would be the opposite right now? Oh, right, it's like getting overwhelmed with the sound. If everybody's like talking, like what would be the opposite? Nobody would be here right now. Oh my gosh, I don't want that at all. Like, I'm so thankful. Or like dishes. Okay, I'm so thankful we have so many dishes to clean because we get to eat so much good food. And kind of, it helps me flip it, right? Because it's like, I want to be thankful because I am grateful for things, but sometimes when things get like routinely, I guess, I don't know, it just resentful. I don't want to be resenting my laundry. I love my laundry. And like my kids, I had like more clothes, but I was doing laundry in my 20s, right? So it's like, I've always been doing laundry. I've always been doing dishes. Like maybe there's a little bit more, but it's the same dishwasher I load. So I don't know. And the last thing I want to talk about was like living for God and not others' opinions. Because I think this is something that I struggle with so much, is like, I'm worried what others will think, or if not, if it'll be okay, or if this or if that. Like sometimes I'll get ideas and I'll go through the thought process of what people might say and shut it down completely already in my head. And then sometimes I'll get those same ideas again and again. I'm like, okay, maybe that's got, but to kind of start thinking of like, if we're thinking of what people will think, like it just doesn't matter. Everyone's living in such a different, like things. Of course, do things that are noble and kind, and right, I'm not saying go do bad things, but it's like if you have ideas or you want to take on a hobby or start posting vlogs or whatever, like if you feel like you want to do it, like go for it, right? Like why it's right at the end, it's our lives, right? nobody else, those people's opinions, they don't get to live out the days that we do. And so it's like, if it makes you happy, have happy days. Moana didn't wait for approval, she followed the call. I just don't like it. Like, it's like, I don't want kids to think it's okay not to listen to parents, right? But I think Moana's supposed to be like older, but still it's important to kind of, I guess, analyze the situation and see, hey, how do we answer the call? So doing things for God, expectations and standards. Well, so that was my Moana essay, but I thought there's so much in that about, okay, if the ocean is like God's calling and she goes out, there's so many things she like learns along the way. God is always guiding us, right? Even when we're in doubt and we're like, I don't know what's going on. It does always work out. Embracing the journey and not just the destination. Because even with Moana, she had to go to the Tamatoa, right? The shiny crab. He's like, I'm shiny. Da 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 bam bam. And she learned about Maui. And then she had to go get Maui prior to that, and then get the hook, right? So she had to go to all these places before she reaches Te Fiti. And I don't know if she would have known that Taka is Te Fiti, right? Because when she's like, Te Fiti's not there, and she realizes Taka has the spiral, she places the spiral in, Taka is like, whoa, comes to life. Would she have known how to do that if she didn't go through all of her challenges? I don't know. I should do a reel where it's like, I'm gonna go to bed so early, and then me at 2 in the morning, I'm like, what did Moana think about when she was? Gratitude is the fastest way to change mindsets. Storms will always come, but we must learn to navigate them and follow God's calling without making up excuses, which is something I want to say, like, keep myself more accountable on. And then I wanted to see, like, if you felt a God's calling, if you felt, hey, I feel like there's a God's calling, and is there something God is calling for you to do right now? I'd love to know all about it. How can we start embracing that journey without waiting for that perfect time? Well, when I move to this other house, well, when I move to this thing, well, when I do this. And I'd love to hear about the gratitude. If there's certain tricks you love to do where it can help you switch your little mindset to help you have a little better day, or what you think about the gratitude one where it's like thinking of the opposite. I don't know, it just helps me. But let me know what you think, and I'll see you next time.